And greetings, and we're going to start yet another journey into Thursday nights of Revelation. Tonight, we are going to start in Revelation chapter 8, and we are going to begin in verse 7. Revelation 8, verse 7, and I'm going to go ahead now and share my screen. We'll take a look at that, and I'm going to go ahead. Whoops, I forgot to make the font really big. That's probably too big. Down just a little bit. There we go. All right. And so we're going to begin in verse 7. And as you can see, we are starting on the first of, we're going to look at the first 4 of the 7 trumpet judgments. A couple of things to remember about the trumpet judgments. This is the next stage of 7 judgments. Okay, there are 3 of them. We've already been through the first 7. The first set, which is the 7 seals. Now we're in the second set, which are the 7 trumpets. And the 7 trumpets you're going to see are more severe in their impact and in their devastation than were the first 7. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start in verse 7. First angel sounded the trumpet, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. And then in verse 8, the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood. And 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. And then verse 10, the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. And then verse 12, then the fourth angel sounded, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, so that 1/3 of them were darkened. 1/3 of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. And I looked, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth,
just like I wanted,
because of the remaining blast of the trumpets of the angels, of the 3 angels who are about to sound. Okay, number of things that we find in common here in this passage. There's some recurring themes, aren't there? What are some of the recurring themes that you see with these first 4 trumpets?
I see 1/3.
1/3. You see 1/3 all the time, don't you? Okay. What else do you see?
Things are being hurled at the earth.
A lot of stuff being thrown at the earth, huh? You blow a trumpet and something's thrown at the earth. Okay. What else do you see? A number of these trumpets have something else in common. There's something that's commonly thrown to the earth.
fire.
Fire. Notice in the first one, hail and fire followed, mingled with blood. Second trumpet, something like a great mountain burning with fire, thrown into the sea. Third trumpet, great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. Fourth trumpet, the heavens struck, and we don't see any fire there. That's the one we don't see, but the first 3 have fire, okay? All right. So there's some things that you see that are in common with these trumpets, and you know, one of the things that you take away from with the 1/3 is, you know, it was the thing I mentioned Sunday in the message, is it makes you kind of stop, doesn't it, and makes you think, why would God only destroy 33%? Why would he only destroy just 1/3 and not the whole shooting match? And the answer is what?
That has to do with judgment.
Well, it is judgment, but why not just do the whole thing all at once? There's something else that's involved with his judgment. And it's another very integral part of God's nature. Say it again.
There's still others to be won to Christ.
Okay, so there's others that are going to be won to Christ. There's others that are going to come to him, and that is that's indicative of his mercy, isn't it? Think about that. He's holding back and he's giving people yet another chance to avoid this, to get another chance to be able to conquer through this, even though they're going to have to go through this, even though they're going to have to not only believe, but they're going to have to follow. They're going to have to be wholehearted followers if they're going to have any chance at all to survive. But this is devastating, isn't it? But you see that indication of his mercy. Okay, so let's go back and let's look at these trumpets and let's look at some of the mechanics. Let's do a little close up on some of these trumpets. So we'll start at the first trumpet, verse 7. It says that when the first angel sounded, hail and fire followed. But the hail and fire are mingled with blood. Okay, this is reminiscent of something else that's happened in the Bible, doesn't it? Where else did we see hail happen that would occur like a plague?
Moses.
Where?
Moses in Egypt.
Oh, it was in Egypt, wasn't it? Okay, that was one of the 10 plagues. Okay, but notice that this hail is got fire with it and it's mingled with blood. Where does the blood come from? I mean, is it all wrapped up in this icy hot rock that's coming down?
Is it the blood from the people that were destroyed in the first third?
I think so. I think, if these things were to fall out of the sky and hit you, I think they'd leave a mark, don't you think?
Yeah.
I think they're going to leave a mark, and they may do more than leave a mark, wouldn't they? They'll probably knock you out, and they'll probably knock a hole in your head. And if that happens, if it hits you coming that fast, that hard, it's probably going to have some bloodshed, don't you think? So I think that's where the mingling of blood comes from. I think you've got the hail and the fire coming down, and that hail hits, and if you're in Susie's neck of the woods right now, if you've been in a hailstorm in Texas, and you get softball-sized hail, man, that not only makes a noise, but it does some damage. It does damage to your car. It does damage to your roof. And if you have livestock outside, it'll do damage to your livestock. And if you're outside, it's going to do damage to you. So this is worldwide. And so you see this. Now, what's interesting is that with this hail and with this fire, 33 of the trees are burnt up and all of the green grass. So this fire is such that there's a loss of 33% of the world's trees, but all the grass is gone. It just burns everything up like to a crisp. So that's going to have an impact on things, don't you think? One of the things I've noticed and just been studying recently are some of the effects of a volcano, of a big volcanic eruption. And there was one in the 19th century that was devastating, and it affected the climate worldwide because the plume of smoke went up so high, the estimations that it went up to the very tip top of the Earth's atmosphere. that whole plume of smoke, and it affected the world's climate and temperatures. And so for a third of the trees to burn up and all the green grass is not beyond the imagination for it to happen. That's something that you can see and you can visualize, but devastating nonetheless. Okay, so that's the first trumpet. So all the vegetation's affected, 33% of the trees and all the grass. Okay, now notice the second trumpet, and you see something like a great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea. Now, notice that John is not saying literally a mountain burning with fire, but he's trying to describe it. It's something like a great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea. Could it be a meteor? Yeah, it could be. But it's also not beyond God's power and ability to drop a mountain out of the sky and drop it into the ocean. I mean, we don't have a problem imagining that. God is powerful enough and strong enough to do something like that. But what's interesting with this is that if you have a great mountain like that and it's thrown into the sea, what's the immediate effect from that? We should know about that because we've seen it enough times in our world after earthquakes. What happens when big
tidal wave,
tsunamis? They go around the world super fast. So if you think about that, how fast a tsunami can travel around the world, around an entire ocean, and I think of that tsunami that happened after the earthquake in Sri Lanka back in 2004, and it was just literally minutes that it took to go completely across the Indian Ocean from Sri Lanka to East Africa. Literally minutes. That's how fast it went. It's not beyond the imagination either to see 33% of the ocean surface of the world turning into blood as a result of this mountain dropping in. But so with that happening, I think it's important to see that John, just by looking at his words, he's trying to describe what falls into the ocean as like a great mountain, but he doesn't equivocate as far as what happened to the water. It didn't just turn reddish color. He says it became blood. And it's very, it's not hard to identify or to determine the difference and see the difference between water and blood, is there? No. And blood has a thicker viscosity. It's more like motor oil than it is water. Water it doesn't have that viscosity, and so that changes the very texture and the very fabric of the water in the ocean, doesn't it? So then it's not surprising to see if a third of the sea becomes blood, everything that's in that bloody water is going to die because the oxygen's out, and those sea creatures cannot breathe anymore. But so that's going to affect the world food supply to a certain degree, since so much of what the human population eats comes out of the ocean. But notice something else too: a third of the ships are destroyed. 33% of the ships are destroyed. So can you describe what that might do to the world economy? Can you imagine what that will do if you have?
Don't worry, your wallet is safe.
And so there, you have a severe impact on the worldwide economy if ships cannot bring cargo from one continent to another. There's the world economy, even if it is under a one world government, a one government rule, it's going to have a dramatic impact because goods and services cannot be transferred across the waters.
Goods like such as what, for example?
Well, you think of all the things that are shipped over into our country from other countries such as China. So much of what we receive right now is assembled and built over there, and then it's shipped by ship. It's taken by ship across the ocean.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that be a good thing that we're not depending on China?
No, you're missing the whole point. At this point, we only have a one world government.
Oh, is it Chinese though?
This,
No,
yeah, this is not just,
Or is it Japanese?
okay,
this is not just cars and what have you. This is all of the fruits and vegetables that are coming from Chile.
yeah,
That feed us. If you look at the fruits in your grocery store, you'll see that a whole lot of them are from South America, other places. So it's coming by ship.
right. One of the reasons we're able to have some fruit in the winter, where it's summer fruit, we're able to have it in the winters because we're shipping it from South America, from the Southern Hemisphere. So that is just one of the examples. But Allison, again, I'm going to remind you, we're looking into the future. We're looking at a one world government. So it's important to pick up on that and keep that in mind, that that commerce that's going to be going around worldwide is going to be seriously curtailed. Okay.
But right now, Pastor, we got ships out there that they can't unload right now.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a number of struggles even in a multi-world or multi-country economy even now. So there'll be some serious havoc wreaked. Okay,
So this one world government you're saying is taking the place of logical thought?
no, didn't even mention logical thought.
Okay.
Didn't even mention that. If you go back and you're reading the book of Revelation, you know that there's going to be the beast that comes from the sea. He's the rider on the white horse. He is the one that's going to be given the kingdom. He's going to be given the authority to rule over the entire world.
For how long?
So for 7 years, go back and as you read the entire book, you'll see that.
I'm glad we won't be here.
Yep. At that point, the church is going to be raptured. All right, let's continue on. We'll look at the third trumpet now. And notice now that with the third trumpet, you have a great star that's falling out of heaven. And again, doesn't that sound like a meteor, a star falling from heaven? But I would think, just my own take with this, that it's better for us to understand it as a star. Let's just take it as a star falling from heaven, burning like a torch, and falls into a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. And so what happens with that is that it's going to ruin 33% of the fresh water supply. And it's interesting, the name of the star is wormwood. And wormwood is used in a number of places in the Old Testament. It's used, and if you look at my note here that I have on the screen, it's used in metaphors to describe the idolatry of Israel. In Deuteronomy, it's used to describe the calamity and sorrow that the southern kingdom of Judah is going to experience once they're taken captive and exiled to Babylon. It's used to describe the consequences of false judgment, and so it's a little bit more background. It's a bitter tasting desert plant. And so it's interesting that it's thrown into the water, a plant coming out of the desert, something that's descriptive of a plant coming out of the desert, thrown into the water, the fresh water supply, and turning it all bitter. So it turns the water bitter, And it says that many men died from the water because of the bitterness. So not only does it have a bitter taste, but it's toxic. And John doesn't give us a number of the casualties, of the fatalities of the people drinking this, but I can imagine that it would be pretty significant, pretty substantial, because of the fact that it's affected so much of the fresh water supply. Okay, so that's what we're looking at with the third one. So far, let's recap. We've lost 33% of the trees. We've lost 33% of the oceans. We've lost 33% of marine life in the oceans. We've lost 33% of the ships, and thus probably that many of the saltwater ports in the world. We've lost.
Wait a minute. Why are you giving a percentage? Scripture never mentions 33% exactly.
It says 1/3, and we've just been looking at this, Allison. I doubt that you've got a Bible in front of you and you're not reading it, but if you did, you'd be able to see that it was 1/3. So
33 and 33 and 33 makes 99, if you don't mind me saying so.
Okay, well,
Right.
all right, fine. If
Do you agree?
If you want to get that technical, but I just assume let's just round it and call
Well,
it.
but you named a false number. You didn't say 1/3. You said
Okay.
33%.
All right, I'll let you win that, Allison.
That's 99 altogether, not 100.
Allison, I'm going to go ahead and mute you
Hey, cut.
because I really don't want to. We don't really need the argument with it. So
Of course.
anyway,
Well, a third would be 33 and a
so
third.
you've seen 33 and a third. That's fine.
Right? That's what a third is.
But it's a significant amount, isn't it? So you've seen this much done, and I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead. Allison, I hope you can hear me right now. Allison, I hope you can hear me. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to argue this. And we're not here to listen to arguments on something that petty and something that trivial. Okay. What we're trying to do is we're trying to go through this and see the significance of it. We're trying to see what the Lord is saying to us. And if this isn't what you need, then you probably need to just jump off and start your own session, start your own study, get your own Zoom account and do that. If that's what you're trying to do is prove so much of what we're talking about is wrong and you're the one that's right. So I don't know what you want to do with this, but if you want to listen along, great. If you want to contribute, that's great. But if we're going to just sit and argue, that's probably not going to be the best thing for all of us.
Well, a third, like I said, is 33 and a third, and that's
You're right.
100%.
You're right, Jack. You're right. Okay.
Amen.
I
Okay.
just roughed it and said 33. That's all I did.
When you were talking about
Oh,
water,
it just says a third.
lot. Even 1% is a lot
Okay.
when you talk about fresh water supply.
Exactly.
I'm just saying.
Okay. So if we're in agreement with that, we'll go ahead and I'll resume the share, and we'll go ahead and continue with this.
I don't know.
All
I don't
right.
know how the percent ever came up.
Well,
My Bible just says 1/3.
it said 1/3.
Yeah, that's 1/3 is just 30.
And I called it 33%. That's
Yeah.
all
You
I-
just left out the third.
Okay.
1/3.
All right. Okay. I can't believe we're making a thing of this.
Because that makes 100%, right?
But you made this a science lesson to begin with, so why can't it be just a mathematics lesson at this point?
This argument is very juvenile.
Can we
Yeah.
stop this? I'm seriously, please.
Please.
Okay. All right. Continuing on. Hopefully we can keep on going with this. Let's look at the fourth trumpet. The fourth trumpet, the angel sounds it, and notice here we've got another 33%, 33 and a third, or 1/3, however you want to use it. A third of the sun, third of the moon, third of the sun, or a third of the stars. They were darkened. And notice here that it's a kind of a both and, that not only are they reduced in their light by 33 and a third percent, but also that the daytime, the amount of daytime has been shortened by 1/3, or 33 and 1/3%. And notice also that the light in the nighttime has also been shortened by that much as well. So that's referring then to the moon and the light that's reflected off the moon that we see. All of that has been dimmed by 33 and a third percent. Okay, and so looking at this, and you'll see that as we go on, this is going to be very reminiscent of one of the plagues, again, that we find in Egypt. And that's when you saw that Egypt was thrown into darkness, but where the Israelites were in the land of Goshen was still had light. They weren't thrown into the darkness. But going a little bit farther, if you look at chapter 16, at bowl, in fact, let's just go there right now. If you look on the screen right here, we'll go to Revelation 16 and go to verse 10. Revelation 16 and verse 10. And here is the fifth bowl judgment. And so when the fifth angel pours out his bowl on the throne of the beast, his kingdom becomes full of darkness. So since his kingdom encompasses the entire world at this point, he is the world ruler, the world is thrown into darkness. And it's painful. It puts people in a place where they're desperate, to where it says in verse 10 here that they will gnaw their tongues because of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so take a look at how severe this is going to get when we get to the bowl judgments. And then going back to the trumpets, you see that it's only a third. And still it's going to be devastating. It's going to be devastating, but yet you see that third there. And what's God doing again? It's important, I think, to remember why just a third? Why just 33%? Why is he holding back just that much? And it's what you said earlier, Jim, wasn't it? What was it?
Yes. There's still disciples to be won to Christ.
Mm-hmm. There's still people that need to come to Christ. There's still people that will have the chance to believe in Jesus, even in the midst of these trumpets. Even when all this is going on, there's still going to be a chance for people to come to Christ, because God doesn't want anybody to perish. He doesn't want them to perish and be lost forever. So it's pretty much that mercy that you see there. And it makes you think about the mercy that God is showing even today.
Mm-hmm.
And where he shows that mercy over and over again. You think of the disasters, and you think of the tragedies and the horrors that go on even today. And yet, even in that, you still see displays of God's mercy. And that's the thing for here. It's really, it's kind of quick. Our first reaction is to be shocked and stunned and horrified, if you will, at these trumpets and the devastation that these judgments will bring upon the earth. But then when you see that it's only a fraction of the world, and yet there's a larger fraction that still has a chance, still has an opportunity to come to Christ, to believe the truth, it shows just another dimension of God's mercy.
Mhm.
What else do you notice in these trumpets? What else do you see that describes God's nature to you? We see his mercy.
He doesn't say, he doesn't specifically target like food sources, if you will. I mean, they're affected, of course, by the grass and the water and stuff, but he could have, you know, taken out a third of the winged creatures, a third of the food, you know,
Mhm.
well, which would have just added on to the impact of the water and the vegetation issues, but he doesn't.
Yeah. And that's interesting when you combine that with the famine from the seven seals. You know, we go back, I think what was it, the third horse, black horse was famine, represented famine. You don't see that come back here in the trumpets, not directly. I suspect, though, that with the first trumpet, that there's been some vegetation that has been affected that would affect plants and crops, perhaps. You could very possibly see that. I think you'd see sea life affected. So next time you went down to try to get a fish taco, that may not be so easy to get. You know, Susie, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, my translation says a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up. That would be all the fruit trees, all the nut trees.
Yeah.
And all the green grass was burned up. That would be all of the wheat, all of the oats, all of the corn.
Yeah.
So the food has been affected.
Food has been affected. When you throw in, it's not just pine trees and oak trees. Yeah, fruit trees would be in that too. Good
And
point.
we got redwoods and sequoias, don't forget them.
Susie, I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, I mean, he's not centering his wrath on just a certain section of the world. It's the entire world. The entire world is in judgment.
Yep. Yeah, that's true. It's a very good point. It's a very good point. So you see, I think you see, and you mentioned this, you see God's judgment. He's a righteous judge. And when you see the severity of his judgment, it's really important to note that even though he's a God of mercy, he's also a God of justice.
Mhm.
And he's bringing justice onto the earth. Remember that there are his people who have confessed him and followed him and been loyal to the Lord Jesus, have lost their lives at the hands of people like this. And so now they're reaping the whirlwind, as it were. And so this justice is brought about, and it's true justice, but yet it's still mingled in with God's mercy. And that's an important thing, I think, to see too. So it's a very good point.
There's no indication, unless I'm forgetting, how much time is passing, like between the seals and the trumpets.
Oh,
Is that about right?
Yeah, there's there's not a real specific period of time. There's nothing specified. So there could be, I think there's a pause. I think in chapter 7, there is a pause. And the angels, you might remember, that are holding on to well, in fact, we'll just go back there and look. Go to chapter 7 and verse 1. After these things, I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. He cried out with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, or the trees. Do not do that. Do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And so you have these angels that are ready to continue on with the judgment. And one of the angels says, hold up, we're going to hold up, and we're going to seal these 144,000 with the seal of God on their forehead, so they'll be protected. So you see that pause there. How long did that take? No idea. But what we do know, based from Daniel, is that it will be a period of 7 years total, and that at that 3.5 year point is when you see the rider on the white horse from the first seal, also known as the beast coming out of the sea in chapter 13, popularly known as the Antichrist. He will not only rise to world power, but he will assume himself to be God of the universe,
Why is he popularly known?
and command everybody to worship him. So you'll see that, and so that's in the halfway point. So where the trumpet falls in there is a little not exact as far as when that's going to be. John's not specific as to when that happens, but taken in sequence, it's going to be after the first 7 seals of seal judgments.
I was just thinking that, like I was saying, it could be worse. These trumpet judgments, he could have, taken out 1/3 of the people in addition to all of this, 1/3 of the animals, 1/3 of the whatever. And not to say that they're not going to be affected by all this, they certainly are, but it could have been worse. And so it just made me wonder how much of the effects of the seals are people living through still when these hit, you know what I mean?
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up. What you'll see in the 7 bowls is that people are still dealing with the first bowl, and now they're getting hit with bowl number 5, and it's just too much for them. The agony is just too much. So yeah, you don't get to the point where, all right, the first one's done, everybody's better. All right, now here comes the second one. They can come one after another. So you're still recovering from one of the judgments, and you get hit with another one. So they could come in rather rapid succession, or it could be staggered out. Remember, we got 7 years in this. And
3.5, right?
Say again?
Total of 7, but this stuff doesn't start until after the halfway point for seals.
No. It will start sometime after the rapture.
Okay.
It should be sometime after the rapture. And the reason I say that is that the first seal is the rider on the white horse. And that's the world ruler, the beast, also known as the Antichrist. So he's going to assume that position of world leadership early on, right at the get-go. In fact, when you combine that with what Daniel says, he's going to be the one to break the deal, cut the deal with Israel to reestablish temple worship, which means there's going to be a temple rebuilt in Jerusalem, which means that he's going to likely, I shouldn't say he will, but it seems at this point that he may be the one to broker the ultimate peace deal between the Arabs and the Israelis as far as who gets on the Temple Mount, to where somehow, some way, the Muslims are satisfied and they're fine with it. And so, because according to Daniel's prophecy, that will happen for 7 weeks. I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it's a 7-year period where he cuts this deal, but halfway through he breaks it. And when you parallel that to what we read in Revelation, you see at about the halfway point when the beast is slain and comes back to life, he assumes himself into the temple, and he's standing in the most holy place, and that's what Daniel calls the abomination that causes desolation, and that's the 3.5-year mark. So you remember where? So
Thank you for that.
kind of that timeline. There's a lot to absorb from that, but that's basically what that is. But it's a good question, because so much of this is happening, and we're going to get to a point as we study this book that there's going to be a lot more moving parts. Like when we get done with the sixth trumpet, now all of a sudden John's going to back up and he's going to introduce some new people. He's going to introduce some new characters, and so he's going to go back and he's going to run up to that point again 2 different times, one with the 2 witnesses, another one with the beast and the false prophet and the dragon and all the rest. So we're going to be bringing all these people in, all these characters into this moment for the last 3.5 years.
Yeah. And if you think about it, you're talking like 21 judgments, right?
Yeah.
Over 7 years. So, I mean, you could almost say there might be a new judgment every 4 months. I mean, you know.
It's coming that frequently, huh? It could come with that frequency.
Yeah.
It's a good point. That's a very good point. Okay. Very good. What other questions come up as you're looking at this?
Why somebody?
Go ahead, Jim.
My question is just a side question. All those people during the tribulation that came to Christ and were taken to heaven, some were martyrs. It wasn't the church. What would that group be called? I can't figure it out.
Are you talking about the ones in this era, the church era, that have lost their lives for Christ?
No, the church is already called away at the rapture.
Okay.
But during the tribulation, many others were won to Christ. And what was that group be called? Is there a name for that group?
What helps me delineate them is calling them the Tribulation Saints.
Tribulation Saints. Okay.
Because they came, and the reason Tribulation Saints is that everybody who comes to Christ, believes in Christ, is a holy one. They're a saint. That's what Paul tells us. So they're saints in that sense, but they came to Christ during the tribulation. So hence they're Tribulation Saints. And so not all of them are going to be martyred. Not all of them are going to lose their lives. Jesus said the ones who endure, the ones who are obedient, faithful, they will have a chance to make it. They will have a chance to physically live through the tribulation. Not all of them lose their lives. So that's why they're called the Tribulation Saints. So so you have the church as such here, you have the tribulation saints, and then you also have Israel, who the light comes on, they come to Christ and they recognize Jesus as their Messiah. And so all of these three groups now are given everlasting life and are going to be in the forever kingdom, the new heaven and the new earth.
Mhm.
Does that answer that, Jim?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, these events that we've been discussing through the 7 trumpets, they have references to Egypt in Moses' day, which was real. So I believe that all these are real events and not just symbols.
No, and that's a good approach to take with it. There's nothing here that suggests that this is symbolic of something else that is going to happen or has happened. I think the approach that I've always taken with this book is you read it and you let the whole thing play out as it's written. And so we're into this next set of judgments. And so, for instance, when we see that we see hail mixed with fire followed, and it's mingled with blood, and it destroys trees and grass, that's exactly what happens. You got these big fiery balls of ice that John's having a tough time describing, but they're there nonetheless, and they do quite a bit of damage.
You mean comet?
No, that's not what John calls it. He doesn't call it that. It might be something similar, but we don't know. We don't know. So, good stuff. Very, very interesting to see this and to see that it's and something else I think is important to see is how methodical the Lord is in bringing out the judgments. He doesn't just do one fell swoop, although he could, but it's very meted out, it's very precise, and it's proportionate at this point. And it's appropriate for the ones that are on the receiving end of this. And I think it's important to see, why blood? And that's another thing to come up. Why blood? Why does the freshwater supply turn to blood? Why does the oceans turn to blood? Well, remember that these people who are here on the earth that are going to be unrepentant, many of them are going to be unrepentant. And they were rebellious, and they had a hatred for God. They had a hatred for his people. They had no problem shedding the blood of those people. Remember, these were the people that are there under the altar. And so the result of that is that because of that, they didn't have a problem with shedding innocent blood. Now that's what they have to drink.
Chris, you're saying how much.
Or wash themselves with.
Right. Go ahead, Susie.
I was just saying, I was thinking when you were saying how methodical.
Yeah.
He is methodical with this. It's a process. It could have just done it in one fell swoop, but he doesn't. It's very meted out, and you see that in the 21 judgments. You see that convergence of these numbers that represent God's completeness and God's unity, and with 21 judgments, 3 sets of 7. The significance of 3 and the significance of 7, being the divine number, the complete number, the completeness of God, and the completeness of his judgments. It's complete, it's thorough, and it's very meted out and measured out. And so that's something for us to consider, that our God is not a tame God. He's someone that we need to fear, and not fear only in the sense of reverence and worship, but he's one that he gets angry. He becomes angry, but his anger is holy. His anger is controlled. His anger is right. And is just as much a part of his nature as is his love and mercy. And it's important for us to keep that in mind, that when he calls us to follow and he calls us to obey, we will have to do some explaining if we're not obedient. And that's one thing that kind of sticks to me. I don't want to be able to be standing before the Lord one day and have him say, what were you doing down there? Because it wasn't what I told you to do. So it's sobering to me and a reminder to me that yes, we serve a God that's a consuming fire.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something for us to remember and to keep in mind.
Yeah.
All right.
Good study.
Any other? And we didn't even get to 13. And this is kind of where we're going to end it, is to look at 13. He says, I looked and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven. And I mentioned this in the message on Sunday. If you have Old King James, New King James, or modern English version, you will have angel. If you have any other English version, you're going to have eagle. Okay, see that how many? So take a look. You've either got angel or eagle, and
Which is
the
the
reason
correct translation.
and the reason for that is that there are two Greek manuscripts that are predominantly used in English translations, and one of them has angelos, and the other one has atu, which is the word for eagle. And they're similar to a certain degree, but still different. And so they had to part ways on that, but then they had to make the distinction. So if you're looking at my screen right now, you'll see a number 3 by angel, and it will say, in some of the translations, it will say eagle.
Okay.
So they'll put that in. So regardless of what it is, of what this being is, if it's an eagle or if it's an angel, notice the content of what it's saying. Saying woe, woe, woe. This word woe means it's an exclamation that means horror. So there's 3 horrors to the inhabitants of the earth. Well, if the first 4 trumpets weren't bad enough, this angel is saying, guess what? It's going to get a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
It's like you're sitting watching the very, very end of the movie, and that's like the little thing like Marvel does at the end of the movie. It's giving you a hint to what's coming in the next one.
Yeah. And all you have to do is keep reading chapter 9, and that's where you start to see, oh my goodness, he's right. It does get worse. It gets awful. So these next 3 are going to be bad, bad, bad. And we'll see that next week. Well, you'll see it. You'll hear about it Sunday when we get into that.
But it also says a blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that indicate that we were talking about angels all along, no eagles?
No, not necessarily. Because
I can't see the eagle blasting a trumpet.
No. Well, that's not what that was. That one that makes that announcement is either an angel or an eagle flying through the sky. That's what it says in verse 13. Look at 13 again. Are you looking at it? Do you see? It's talking about an angel or that being flying. It's not blowing a trumpet.
I
'Cause you
know
have-
that.
You have 7 angels that are already lined up with the trumpets.
But
so
the three
this-
other angels are
this-
blowing trumpets.
This one is announcing, Jack, that that it's going to get a whole lot worse.
Yeah.
That's what that means. All right.
Well, it's like I said
So-
earlier, it's good we're not going to be here.
So next week we're gonna jump in and take a look at that one, at the 5th trumpet, and we'll spend some time there because John spends an awful lot of time describing this. So keep that in mind. I'm gonna go ahead and